Well, we all know that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, but was he the first? Many things to talk about with ancient travelers with our special guest tonight, Dr. Gunnar Thompson. He's next on Coast to Coast AM. I guess you could call Gunnar Thompson a time detective whose enduring passion has been to uncover the secrets of the past. He is a world traveler, archaeologist, anthropologist who has served on the faculties of 7 universities here in the United States. Gunnar is also the director of the New World Discovery Institute. He has written several watershed books and numerous articles on the subject of early voyages to the New World before Columbus. His discovery of the omnibus power sign in 1985 offered the first conclusive proof that Asian mariners had made a significant contribution to the origins of the New World civilization. Gunnar is widely acknowledged as a leading world expert on multi-ethnic New World discovery. He is recommended as a guest by none other than our friend Glenn Kimball. Hey, Gunnar, how are you?
It's great to be on the show, George.
Likewise. We're probably slamming your website, by the way, so I want everyone to know that eventually it'll loosen up and we can get back into it. We send millions of people to your website every night, Gunnar, and that happens sometimes.
Well, that's great. We'll cope with it.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into the secret voyages and in missions like that.
I've been studying ancient voyages to America for about the last 30 years or so. When I got into anthropology back at the University of Wisconsin in the late 1960s, early 1970s, Thor Heyerdahl was sailing primitive Egyptian reed boats across the Atlantic Ocean to prove that the Egyptians could have sailed across the Atlantic before Columbus. And that got me interested in the subject, and subsequently in various universities I've gone through every book I could find in the libraries looking for all the information that I can, and I've come across tremendous numbers of artifacts, plant dispersals, what's generally referred to as diffusion of artifacts and culture across the oceans before Columbus for every ancient maritime civilization. So it's become absolutely mind-boggling to me that I live in an advanced technological society such as the United States of America, where they still teach in school that there was no significant explorers before Columbus, and we're still celebrating Discovery Day.
Is it because they just don't care? Or are they sweeping it under the carpet on purpose? What's their rationale for this?
Well, actually, they very much care. They don't want this stuff to happen. Partly there's a conspiracy of ignorance. Partly there's a conspiracy of dogma. All your educators, particularly your college tenured professors, go through a training program which selects out those that believe, those that don't believe from those who believe, and those who believe in the dogma that's presented are promoted into positions in the universities. Now, most of these people aren't. They see themselves as scientists. They aren't deliberately anti-new evidence, but the environment that they're brought up in teaches them to condemn any new evidence as a hoax or a fraud. And so the result is that even though the new evidence is brought forth by maverick scholars such as myself, Glenn Kimball, Thor Heyerdahl, Betty Meggers, and so on, the stuff is pushed aside, is pushed under the carpet, it's condemned. Many of us have written articles, and they don't get into journals because there's gatekeepers that make sure that new information is kept out. So it's actually a conspiracy.
What a shame. I remember when I was a kid reading Kon-Tiki and just marveled at what that raft looked like. And, I think he proved his point, don't you?
Absolutely, I think he proved his point. And I brought that up in an anthropology class, and shortly thereafter, the anthropology professors in the department at the University of Wisconsin suggested to me that I might have a better time in a different department, in a different PhD program.
So you think outside the box and you get penalized for it.
Well, exactly. And it's really difficult to see America as an advanced modern society when you go through an educational program where when you come up with evidence that doesn't agree with the existing paradigm or the status quo, that you're shunted aside, you're told to go elsewhere. I got straight A's in anthropology as an undergrad, and then when I went to the graduate school at the University of Wisconsin, they told me that I wasn't suitable for their program. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous.
You've sent us some images that we have up on the coasttocoastam.com website, and I invite everybody to get up there and take a look at them. But on image number 3, which is a copy of the original 1418 Ming map of the world, I want you to explain this first of all. And then I want to ask you, Gunnar, how in the heck, even assuming this was done way pre-Christopher Columbus, how did they get so accurate? You see, I always think that they got help from above. When you look down on a planet like this, I just can't figure out how 600 years ago they were able to figure this out. But tell me about this map.
Well, the map in question was purchased by a Beijing attorney, one of the leading attorneys in China. His name is Liu Gang, and he purchased this about 5 years ago from a Shanghai antique dealer. And he didn't think an awful lot of it other than he suspected it was a very old map. But after he read Gavin Menzies' book, a British author that wrote a book called 1421, The Year China Discovered America, or The Year China Discovered the World, he realized that there were some similarities between what the British author was writing about and what he saw on this map. And so he decided to contact Menzies and find out if he couldn't get a more definitive determination about whether this map was authentic and what it all meant. And he tried getting some information from local Chinese historians, and basically most of them have subscribed to the same kind of Western dogma that has infested American academia, and essentially says that nothing significant happened before Columbus. So he's wondering, how could he possibly have a map that looks so old, that has it's got the Old World on it, it's got Africa in very fine detail, it's got Asia.
It's got North Pole, South Pole, right?
North Pole, South Pole, yes. It's got essentially two hemispheres. One hemisphere is the Western Hemisphere, the other hemisphere is the Eastern Hemisphere. But in the Western Hemisphere, he's got both North and South America. Now, there's a lot of mistakes in how these continents are delineated, but you can tell just by looking at the map that accurately it's got North and South America. And so he called up Menzies, and Menzies knew by this point in time, this was about a little less than 2 years ago, Menzies was quite familiar with my research. I'm about the only scholar that's put a considerable amount of time into researching ancient maps of America before Columbus, and there's many. But I knew right away by looking at the map that this map had the right kind of detail and the right kind of mistakes that I would have expected of an early Ming map. Now, the early Ming map, dating to about, dating to 1418, is about 100 years before Columbus. So how can this be? Historians have said that there was all this difficulty in determining longitude, and European maps don't begin to approach the accuracy of this Ming map for another century. So how could it be that Ming explorers are about 2 centuries ahead of the Europeans? Well, if we go back and study ancient Chinese maps, going back to the Song Dynasty in about the 10th and 11th centuries, we find that already by this point in time, the Chinese had achieved a level of map making that produced maps. This is 1,000 years ago. They produced maps that were almost as accurate as anything the Europeans could make under Captain Cook in the 18th century and then in the 19th century. I mean, these maps are extremely accurate.
How, with 1,400 technology, how do they make maps like this without seeing a perspective of the planet from way above, from space? How did they do this?
Well, we might be astonished given the history that we have. One of the things that we learned in our history class was supposedly the telescope wasn't invented until Galileo. And once you've got a telescope, you can do much more accurate use of celestial navigation using the stars to determine fixed points on Earth. And it turns out that the Chinese probably had the telescope by the 3rd millennium BC, or 5,000 years ago. I found evidence in European artworks of a 1492 illustration done in Germany, for example, showing a telescope. Another example by an artist named Matthew Paris, who shows use of the telescope in the 13th century.